The Crypt interviews in association with Mayo Leisure Point Castle Bar.
You're listening to The Crypt, and today's special guest is Stefanie Estes, star of the spine-chilling horror Bethany, from acclaimed filmmaker James Cullen Bressick, which releases in theatres and on demand April 7th via Uncorked Entertainment. So you're very welcome to the show, Stefanie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Well, before we talk about the film, can you talk about how you got started in acting?
Sure. Well, my aunt and uncle were both actors. My aunt was on a soap opera and my uncle was an opera singer. So growing up, I was sort of exposed to a lot of theatricality. And I was really drawn to the stories that they got to tell and the characters that they got to play. And I just thought that was so cool that they got to sort of transport themselves into these different worlds. And as I got older, I decided I wanted to do it myself. And I started doing plays in middle school and high school. And I think I just became addicted to the thrill of it. And then, you know, knowing that you can also, with a play or a film, communicate something to an audience that resonates with them and, you know, touches them in some way. I decided that was something that I wanted to pursue professionally. So I ended up going to university to study it. I went to NYU and got my BFA there. And then, have been doing it ever since.
And can you talk about some of the other movies you've worked on?
Sure. I've done like a sort of range of films. I've done a few other horror films, like a zombie one where I play a demon from hell. And then I've done things like romantic comedies. I did this really sweet romantic comedy called When Harry Tries to Marry, which we filmed partially in India. It's about an Indian American guy who's struggling with the idea of arranged marriage and true love. So that, I've done a romantic comedy, horror, fantasy, sort of the gamut.
And then how did your role in Bethany come about?
Well, I auditioned. I sent in an audition tape to the producers, and I guess James, the director, saw something that he really liked in it, and he brought me in for a callback where I read for him and some other people, and we did a number of scenes a couple of times, and I left, and a couple of hours later I got a call saying that they wanted me for the part. So it was a bit of a whirlwind, because then we ended up we started shooting the film about 3 weeks later, so it was quite fast.
Could you tell listeners a bit about the storyline?
Sure. So I play Claire, who's a woman who has just inherited her childhood home from her recently deceased mother, and she and her husband Aaron moved back in. And as soon as they move back in, you realize that she has all these traumatic memories associated with this house, and specifically with her mother, and with what you come to know is her imaginary friend from her childhood, named Bethany. And in the course of the movie, Claire begins to relive the trauma from her childhood, and it starts to take a sort of supernatural turn, and you start to wonder if what is happening to her are things that are actually happening, or if she's inventing them in her own head, because you realize that her mental state is quite compromised. And by the end of the movie, there's a twist. Some new information about the reality of her childhood is revealed, which sort of links the supernatural occurrences to an actual traumatic event that occurred in a really, I think, emotionally impactful way.
Well, you did very well there to explain it without giving anything away. That takes skill. I absolutely loved the film. I thought it was a great story, and I loved that where you were on two minds of what was going on, you know. And then, of course, Shannon Doherty played your mum. She was fantastic. It's so weird to see her so dark and twisted. She played the character very well.
But such a good performance, I thought.
And of course, Shannon, she's fighting her own battle at the moment. I think she's fantastic how she's sharing her journey on social media. I'm sure she's inspiring so many women out there.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's very brave, and I applaud her. And yeah, I think it's wonderful.
Then also Zach Ward, who played your partner in the movie. So he was a co-writer.
Yes.
On the script. Does that add pressure when you're playing the role up against the guy who wrote it?
Of course, in my mind, it did. Yeah, you want to get it right when you're acting against the person who helped create the characters. But Zach was such a nice guy and such a giving scene partner, and was really game for collaboration. So any fears that I had, he immediately, put them out, just based on his kindness and his professionalism and his willingness to collaborate.
Well, I'd say it was quite an exhausting role, because you had an awful lot of crying scenes.
Yes,
throughout.
Yes. I ran into Zach recently, and he looked at me and he was like, "Oh, I barely recognize you because you don't look upset and you're not crying. You look like happy and rested and, like a normal person." So yeah, I think playing that character, when you're constantly in a state of emotional duress, it starts to weigh on you emotionally in your real life and physically too, I think.
Well, you played the part superbly, and I really recommend the film. Can you tell people again when it's released on April 7th where they can see it?
Sure. It will be on VOD. You can get it on VOD and in select theaters across the United States.
Have you any other projects coming up that you'd like to talk about?
There's a sci-fi film that should be releasing later this year. It has a sort of Hitchcockian feel to it, and then a 1950s period piece, which is called Nothing Like the Sun, and has a lot of strong female characters in it, which I always like. And that should be coming out later this year as well.
Excellent. And then if anybody wants to follow you on social media.
Yes, I am on Instagram, and that's at Stefanie Estes, and then on Facebook, which is at official Stefanie Estes.
Well, Stefanie, thank you so much for coming on the show. And as I said, I really enjoyed the movie, and I hope everyone goes out to watch it when it's released on April 7th.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
The Crypt interviews in association with Mayo Leisure Point Castle Bar.